Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Boris Herzog. I am the program manager for Guam PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. This slide tells you a little bit about what we do. We provide one-on-one counseling services as well as group workshops and webinars like this for anybody that's going after a government contract. So if you're going after a federal government contract or a local government contract, we're here to assist. The types of assistance we provide mainly deals with registrations and certifications. So if you're familiar with federal contracting, which I hope you are, since we're going to be talking about the federal acquisition regulations today, the first two things you need to do is our get a DUNS number and register in a database known as SAM, the System for Award Management. In that database, you can find opportunities. So once your company is registered, you'll be able to look for opportunities, solicitations, RFPs, RFQs, things like that. And if you want to bid on something, we can provide you with assistance in how to prepare your proposal or your quote. We obviously can't write your proposal for you, but we can give you tips. And then win or lose, you can request a debrief. You're entitled to a debrief, but you need to request one, so we can help you with that process as well. A debrief tells you how you did, how you were graded, where you went right, where you went wrong. So always get a debrief, win or lose. And so the start to finish of the entire government procurement process. On the GovGuam side, we can also do the same thing, help you with, normally it's an IFB or an RFP, even an RFQ, and we can help you with all the different, for the GovGuam side, there's a bunch of, what do you call them, affidavits you need to submit. So if you have any problems with those affidavits, we can help you prepare those, as well as, work on how to respond to what the government is asking. All right, and I think we do have a Government of Guam procurement workshop coming up. In fact, I think that might be next week. But anyways, so we are funded by a grant from the Department of Defense through the Defense Logistics Agency. University of Guam hosts our program. So we have offices over at the University of Guam inside the School of Business, room 116 and room 117. We also have office space that was donated to us by different organizations. So the Bank of Guam provided us office space over at the Upper Tumon branch. Francine works out of that office. And then GITA, 5th floor ITC building, they provide us office space there as well. And Frank, one of our other PTAC counselors, works out of there. And then GTA gives us our cell phones and our communications and internet at the bank. So thank you very much, GTA. Some of the highlights, we have over 600 active clients. And in fiscal year 20, they won over $100 million in contracts. We've helped a ton of clients get HubZone certified. That's something else we can do. We can help you with federal small business certifications. So if you want to go that route and get HubZone certified or woman-owned or 8A or service-disabled vet, or even participate in the Small Business Mentor Protege program, we can assist with all those different registrations. HubZone seems to be the most popular one just because all of Guam is in a HubZone. And so it's a little easier to get that certification compared to other places in the United States. All right, some of the partners that we work with, the SBA, those small business certifications are all part of the SBA. If you want to, though, get help with grants and loans like the PPP and the EIDL and the restaurant revitalization, all that kind of stuff, we do not assist with those. So please go see one of our other partners, the Small Business Development Center, the SBDC. They're also located at the University of Guam in the School of Business as well. And they can help you with all those different things, as well as business development. So that's their focus. So starting a business, expanding your business, QuickBooks training, financial training, putting a business plan together. Those are all the services they offer. We don't handle any of those things. We strictly focus on government contracting. And some of the last partner that we work with quite a bit is APTAC, the Association of PTACs. So every PTAC has a coverage area. Guam PTAC covers Guam. We also assist with the CNMI. They have their own PTAC, but they are trying to get a new program manager, and they're just starting out. So we help them as much as we can. So every PTAC has a coverage area. So we have an organization of all these different PTACs, 90 plus PTACs across the country, where we can go and find the latest and greatest with federal updates on federal contracting, as well as usually they come in handy when there's a problem. Let's say some company on Guam ran into an issue with SAM or DUNS or something, or some kind of solicitation issue. We can go to our association basically and pose the question and find out if anyone has ran into a similar issue and what they did to resolve it. And that's usually where that comes in handy. All right, so that's the Guam PTAC. Our services are all free of charge. It's all paid for with your tax dollars already. So please use us. We're here to assist you with all your government contracting needs. All right, so let's get started. Today, we're going to talk about, and like I said earlier, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat or save them till the end, whatever you want to do. We're going to talk about FAR clauses today. So if you're familiar with federal contracting, the FAR are the Federal Acquisition Regulations. We're also going to talk a little about the DFARS, which is the Department of Defense supplement to the Federal Acquisition Regulations. And the reason why we care a lot about the Department of Defense and what they're doing on Guam is because about 98, 99% of all the contracts awarded on Guam come from the Department of Defense, specifically most through the Department of the Navy with the NAVFAC Marianas, NAVFAC Hawaii, NAVFAC Pacific, but also Anderson 36 Contracting does quite a bit as well. So we're going to focus on the FAR and the DFARS today and the typical clauses you see, and we're going to use a commercial solicitation for commercial items as a basic backdrop of the clauses that we're going to talk about. Now, obviously, service solicitations and construction solicitations have different clauses, and they're included there. We might add that on a future workshop, but for now, we're going to kind of focus on commercial items. All right, so what is the FAR? The FAR are the Federal Acquisition Regulations. It's basically the Bible of federal contracting, right? All the laws and rules related to federal acquisition for the executive branch of the government, federal government, are in the FAR. So if you're selling to the Department of Defense, which is under the executive branch, these are the regulations you follow. So these are basically all the policies and and procedures for acquisition. And then, like I said, there's a supplement for the Department of Defense, the DFARS, and there's also the AFARS, which the Air Force has a supplement itself. There's GSAM. There's a bunch of pretty much agency can add to the FAR and tighten up the rules a bit for their agency. They just can't make it less restrictive. So there's two executive branch agencies that are not subject to the FAR, and those are the FAA and the US Mint. We do have some FAA offices out here, so if you are selling to the FAA, just know that they do not need to follow the FAR when they're doing their purchasing. They follow their own rules. All right, what's the goal of the FAR? Well, besides, we need rules when the government's purchasing. They are using taxpayer money to buy goods, supplies, services, construction, and so they need to spend that money wisely. So there needs to be some rules in place. So specified right in the beginning of the FAR, it's basically to satisfy the customer in terms of cost, quality, and timeliness. So basically the customer is whatever agency is purchasing the products or services or construction. They just want to make sure they get a good price, good quality, and they get it in time. The government does want to make sure that they're using successful contractors. So that as much as possible, they want contractors who have successful past performance. That does not mean contractors with just experience. They want contractors who have successful experience, meaning they have grades, they've been graded, there's some record of how well they did on their previous projects. So just remember the difference between past experience and past performance is experience is what you've done, past performance is how well you've done it. So basically what the FAR is saying here in this bullet point here is, it's very rare that you as a first-time contractor, the first contract you just open your doors, the first contract you're ever going to get from the federal government. That is a very rare thing. You might be a subcontractor, first time under a federal prime, that's fine. But a federal prime really needs some past performance. And we do a whole workshop on responding to RFPs, and we talk a lot about past performance and how you can gain past performance and how you can team up to get past performance and things like that. So I'm not going to delve too far into that, but just know that that's one of the requirements of the FAR. Promoting competition. So the government does like competition, although sometimes it seems like they don't. When you see some solicitations, sometimes things are, they want a name brand only, and you might think, well, what's that about? I thought we're supposed to have competition. Well, it could be maybe they need that name brand because it's the only thing that's going to interface properly with other equipment that's connected to that piece of equipment. Or maybe they need that name brand because it's spare parts for a piece of equipment, and that only that name brand has those spare parts. So there could be reasons for that. But in general, the government does want to promote competition there, and there really is a lot of competition on Guam in all different kinds of services and construction and supplies. And the reason for that is competition, you know, in economic theory, competition provides lower prices. There's competition, the more chance that the government can get a better price, which is better use of taxpayer money. And the government wants to minimize operating costs as much as possible. So you see that a lot, and they do that a lot, especially in the construction industry. You'll see things known as MACs, multiple award construction contracts. And basically what this is like kind of like bundling a bunch of contracts, maybe 50 to 100 different projects over the course of 5 years, and combining it all into one type of award, basically, and only maybe 5 to 7, maybe 10, up to 10 contractors get to bid on these projects. And that's minimizing administrative costs. And of course, integrity, fairness, and openness, that's part of the FAR. So there, if you see something wrong, there is a chance to protest. You can protest, and there's procedures for that. And we do a workshop on that. So I won't go too far into that. And fulfill public policy objectives. Okay, so those are the goals of the FAR. So now we know what the FAR is, what the goals are. How do contracting folks decide what clauses? So let me back up a little bit. If you've ever seen a government solicitation, you'll notice that's quite lengthy, usually, even if they're buying something simple. And we're going to use an example here for concrete forms. You know, it's probably 5-10 pages long, and you think, well, why does it have to be that long? Well, there's usually a listing of all the different FAR clauses, right? The Federal Acquisition Regulation clauses. So all the different rules and laws that are going to apply to this contract should you win it. And so every solicitation has these. RFPs have these, RFQs have these, all these different FAR clauses listed. So how does the contracting office know which ones to include? Yeah, well, there's actually, it tells you in the FAR how to do it. And we're definitely not going to go onto that because it's very complicated. And it's something that contracting officials learn in the federal government. But there are in Part 52, if you want to read it yourself, there's a link here I put for you. And it tells, gives instructions to contracting officials, so contracting officers, contracting specialists, how to use those FAR clauses and which ones to put in solicitations. There's actually an online matrix they can use where they can just click some, you know, this solicit, it's going to be an RFP, it's going to be for commercial items, and it's going to be firm fixed price or whatever it is. And they just check a few boxes, and then the smart matrix will tell them, okay, well, then you need to include these clauses in this solicitation. So that's basically how it works. So if you're ever wondering, like, why do they put this clause in this solicitation? There is a method to it, and that's what contracting folks use. So like I said, today we're talking about a simple commercial item clause. So right now, this is live right now, actually, well, actually, it's actually closed. It closed on September 21. But this was for concrete forms for RHS's Red Horse Squadron. Their squadron up there on Anderson. They do a lot of material buys, and they do a lot of repair and maintenance type stuff. So they're looking for these concrete, or they were looking for these concrete forms recently. And these are some of the typical FAR clauses they included in their solicitation. So normally you'll see something like this in almost every commercial item solicitation where they're referencing FAR 12.6. They're talking about the streamlined procedures for the solicitation. So basically, this is just letting you know that this solicitation that you're reading is trying to be as simple as possible. And there's going to be some evaluation criteria listed. So in the solicitation, we're going to tell you, the offerer or the contractor, normally known as the person who's going to submit an offer, they call them the offerer, how you're going to be evaluated. Is this going to be price only? Is there going to be some technical factors involved? Is there delivery requirements? You know, whatever is required, it will be listed in the solicitation. And then they're going to tell you how they're going to select and what rationale they're going to use to select the offerer. So of course, they want the most advantageous to the government, which many times means the best price. However, sometimes it might not mean that. It could be they need something right away, so who can do it the fastest. Or it might mean they need something with a certain capability that only 1 or 2 vendors have. So whatever it is, they're going to document it in the solicitation, their rationale on how they're going to select who the winner is. And like I said, but many times, I'd say 80% of the time, maybe a little more, 85% of the time, price is going to be the main factor. And then if there's any trade-offs, they're going to list it in that solicitation. And basically there's the synopsis and the solicitation itself are combined in one single document. So that's what you see. And where are these posted? These are usually posted in SAM. Go to sam.gov, click contract opportunities, and then use Guam as a keyword search, and you'll see all these different opportunities. Anytime, at any given day, there's probably 20 to 30 opportunities available for Guam and the Guam area. So this is what you see normally for a commercial items solicitation. It's just basically letting you know how the solicitation is going to be evaluated and what you need to include in your offer. Sometimes you'll see something for a brand name. And so you'll see this in there. Like I mentioned earlier, the government does want to have competition, but sometimes they do need to get a brand name. They need to get a certain component from a certain type vendor. So, however, sometimes it'll also say not just brand name, but or equal, right? So what is equal to that brand name? And this is what they mean by that. So to be equal, it means whatever you're supplying has to meet this pretty much the same or similar characteristics as the brand name they're looking for. So let's say they were looking for, I'm just going to use an example. I don't think they'd ever do this, but let's say they were looking for a Carrier air conditioner and you supply Train or a different brand. Well, as long as your air conditioner has the same performance characteristics, the same functional, same physical, so it's pretty similar in size, it does the same things, you can supply that as an alternate. So you would just have to disclose, of course, your brand name, your make and model, include any descriptive literature. So if you have any drawings or a spec sheet on whatever item it is, include that. And then if there's any modifications that you're going to make to that item to make it fit the characteristics, let the government know what those modifications are going to be. And then the contract officer will evaluate it. So they're going to evaluate based on what you give them. The contracting officer, according to this clause, has no responsibility to go on their own and look for if you don't include any information, you don't include a spec sheet, you don't include an illustration, they don't have to go out and chase that. They don't have to ask you for it. They don't have to go online and look for it themselves. They're going to just look at what you give them. So make sure you give them everything they need to make a proper evaluation of your offer. So that's the whole point of this clause. An equal to a brand name is allowable. It's just you need to provide all the information. The contracting officer does not need to go and dig for information. Then you'll see this, instructions to offers, commercial items. And this is a long FAR clause. There's so many parts to this, 52.212. So we'll go through a few of the parts that are listed in most solicitations. So it's the first part of this is just saying, hey, you need to submit your offer on this SF 1449 or a letterhead or as specified in the solicitation. And most people don't really have to worry about this too much because in the solicitation, in the RFQ, in the RFP, it'll tell you exactly how to submit your offer. And normally they'll provide you, especially in an RFP, the actual form where you submit your offer. But if it's a simple RFQ, some commercial item they want the air conditioner or whatever it is, normally they say in there, hey, we just want you to include a price and quantity, and they'll specify exactly what you want. And sometimes they'll give you a separate attachment where you just write it all in. But it will be specified in the solicitation. That's the point. If it's not in there, you can ask the contract officer, hey, how do you want me to respond to this? All right. Actually, the government likes to see multiple offers. So the government has an idea of what they want, right? We want this air conditioner because we know it. We've had it before. It fits this size room, whatever it is. But if you know of a better way of doing this, and it'll save the government some money, that's encouraged. Submit a separate offer. Submit your offer that meets all the conditions of the RFQ or the RFP. But then if you want to turn in an alternate offer, that's fine. They'll be willing to look at it as well. And they're going to evaluate them separately. So one evaluation will not have an effect on the other offer. Normally in an RFQ, commercial items, the government doesn't intend to negotiate. So basically what you offer is your final offer. So whatever you put in there, your price, that's going to be your best price. They normally don't want to call you and say, hey, can we work on a deal here or something like that. That's normally for RFPs and things like that. But RFQs are strictly commercial items usually. And they just say, hey, you know what, whatever you put in your response, that's it. That's the final. Always ask for a debrief. Like I said earlier in the intro, you're entitled to a debrief. And so, but you won't get one unless you ask. So once you find out if you're the successful offerer or the unsuccessful offerer, call them up, send them an email and say, hey, can I get a debrief? Now, normally, I'll be honest here, when it comes to commercial items, the debrief is usually an email back to you, one sentence that says you are not the lowest price, right? That's the normal situation. However, sometimes if there are other evaluation factors like terms of delivery or maybe some technical specs that they need, then you can, find out, hey, I was a lower price. Why did you go with this other guy? And then they'll explain it to you. So. All right, the second part, 52212 evaluation. So again, this kind of reiterates the government's going to go to the responsible offerer who's most advantageous to the government based on the evaluation factors put in the solicitation. And then they're going to issue a written notice of award, and that's going to be the binding contract, especially in a RFQ. When you respond with your quote is final, and when they accept it, that's it. That's the contract right there when they sign it. So. All right, there's just some typical questions that pop up sometimes when it comes to government contracting. If it's not mentioned in the solicitation, how long do you need to hold your price? So normally they'll say in the solicitation, hey, we expect to award this in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or whatever it is. And that's how long you would hold your price. But if it's not mentioned, the default is 30 days, 30 calendar days. That comes from the FAR. If there's no time specified in the solicitation, what time is your quote due? So this happens sometimes. You'll see a solicitation and they'll say, all right, it's due on September 21, like this one was. But it doesn't put a time in there. And you're like, wait a sec. What is it, 8 a.m.? Is it 5 p.m.? What is it? When is the quote due, right? So if there's not listed in the solicitation, the default time, according to the FAR, is 4:30 p.m. local time. All right, so just something to consider. And you can always ask too. If you read through a solicitation and say, hey, there's no time here, you can send an email to the contracting officer and find out. Can the government accept a late quote? Normally the answer is no, but there are times when it can be. And of course, in emergency situations, some of the rules go out the window. But in regular time, if you are the only offerer and you're the only proposal they received and it comes in late, they can accept it. That's in the FAR. All right, so some more things here. Contracting terms and conditions, commercial items. This is section 4 of that. This is, again, a very long section of this clause, but it's basically your standard contract law is basically what it talks about, all the different, kind of like private sector contract law, the different things that come into play. It mentions how you can assign your contract to a bank or a credit union, so that's possible. And I've seen people do that. So basically, let's say you don't have the funds to, you want to supply these air conditioners to the government, but you don't have the funds up front. So you talk to your bank and the bank is saying, yeah, we'll do it, but we want you to sign the contract to us. So we'll basically loan you the money. You buy the product from your vendor or your supplier, and then you sell it to the government. And then when they pay, they're basically going to pay us, the bank, and we'll pay off the money you loaned you and then give you the rest, right? And that basically your profit is what you get. So that can be done, and that's allowable. You just got to make sure the bank you're dealing with or the credit union you're dealing with is registered in SAM. They would need to have an active SAM registration because the money will be paid to them directly if you do something like this. Invoicing and payment instructions, those are all listed in this. So it's nothing really big there. Interest and taxes. So if the government, after you submit, so let's go to our air conditioning example. You won the contract, you supply the air conditioning, then you use the government's invoicing system. In this case, Department of Defense, they use a system known as WAF, the Wide Area Workflow. So you submit a proper invoice in there, and they accept it. They're supposed to pay you in 30 days. If it takes longer than 30 days, they will automatically pay you some interest. And a lot of people ask, well, what's the interest rate? I'm not quite sure. It's usually whatever, I guess, the standard banking interest rate is at that time. So if they pay you late, they will pay you some interest. Taxes are normally responsibility of the prime contractor. In fact, most solicitations say you are responsible for all local and federal taxes related to this contract. So reasons for termination are also listed here. The government, one of the key things that's different with the private sector and the federal government is the federal government can basically unilaterally cancel a contract. They really don't have to give you any warning. They can just say, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore, and they'll just terminate the contract. And so if that happens, T for termination for convenience, it's normally called. The government, maybe something happened, they don't need the item anymore. So that could lead to some problems usually, especially if you had to like prepay your vendor and it's a special type of item that you really can't sell anywhere else. That could lead to some issues, but that's not the case normally. Normally they'll say, hey, you know what, we know you have your vendor get this to you, and we know you paid in advance. But it looks like there's other people around here that could probably purchase that item. So the government might not do anything in that case. However, if it's something that you had to shell out some money for some startup costs or something like that, the government may say, yeah, that's reasonable and we'll pay you for that. Or if it's something you've been constantly delivering and all of a sudden they say, we don't need this anymore, they will pay you for what you've already delivered, obviously, and what you've already completed, especially like on a construction project. If this has happened, they've stopped the construction project in the middle of doing it and say, we don't want to build this built anymore, but you already laid the infrastructure in, they'll pay for what's already been done. But the government can, and that's a big thing with federal contracting, can terminate a contract one-sided. They don't need agreement from the contractor. So just know that. All right, so what are acceptable excuses for delaying contract performance? This comes into play sometimes, especially during these COVID times. So if you're late delivering whatever you need to deliver, there are excusable reasons. And so if you got acts of God, public enemy, war happened in whatever country you're getting the product from, something like that, or somewhere along the line, ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, right? That actually happened. So fires, floods, epidemics, that's kind of what we're in right now, right? An epidemic, quarantine restrictions. And then when this COVID first started and lots of places were on lockdown, that obviously led to delays in contract performance, strikes, severe weather, typhoons, things like that. So your ship is delayed, nothing you can do about it, right? Those are all excusable delays, and you won't get dinged on your performance. Basically, you won't get a bad grade if you have an excusable delay. Just related to that, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course. So this started back in 2020, meaning contractors could request reimbursement if they had to pay paid leave for government and contractors for the employees on a government contract. And now they got to modify these contracts. So you could get reimbursed for that. I'm not sure if this is still happening, but this was happening in the beginning in 2020. But I kind of covered that already. Yeah, terminate. So terminate the contract for sole convenience. So that's in the FAR. All right, so here's some more things. System for award management. So you'll see these 52-204 clause sections and of the FAR listed in many, not just commercial items, but also in the service and construction solicitation. So basically, it used to be that you just needed to be active in the SAM. Actually, before it was called SAM, it was known as the CCR, the Central Contractor Registration. And you just needed to be active in there before they awarded the contract. Now, though, I think the regulation has been changed. And you basically have to have an active SAM registration at the time of submittal and at the time of award and throughout your performance and at final payment. So basically your SAM needs to be active throughout the entire start to finish of the contract, even before when you submit your proposal or your quote. You got to have your cage code in your submitted quote. And so I know many people think the DUNS number is the thing that connects everything. It's not. The cage code is the most important thing. The whole reason why you register your company in SAM, the System for Award Management, is to get the cage code. Once you're done and your registration is successful, they issue you your cage code and your commercial and government entity code. That's what cage stands for. And that code is what allows you basically to do business with the government or even apply for a grant. So if you're going after those PPPs and EIDLs and things like that, or even just you form an organization and want to go after some government grants, you're going to need a cage code to do that. So you got to have your cage code in your submitted code. You got to maintain your cage code just like the SAM registration. So it's kind of connected to the SAM registration. When you're maintaining your SAM, by default, you're also maintaining your cage code. However, if your cage code changes, you got to update. I'm sorry, not your cage code, but if your company name changes, you got to update your SAM first, then notify your contracting officer. All right. Child labor, you should be doing something to make sure the products you are supplying are not made in countries using child labor. Now, normally the government, they like to purchase Buy American, but there are many, many exceptions to Buy American. There's trade agreements we have in place with other companies that allow products to be sold as American, even though they're made in other countries. There are dollar values. So if you're not over a certain dollar value, if the solicitation is, for I'd say under $5,000, normally $7,000, something like that, then the rules of Buy American don't come into play. So it all depends. There's a slide on Buy American coming up as well, but basically child labor, you need to make sure that wherever you're getting your products, there's no child labor, forced child labor happening. And basically you're going to agree to cooperate. If there is some kind of investigation, if the government thinks, hey, I don't know, these were made in this country, the things you're providing us, and we want to make sure there's no forced child labor going on, then you're going to actually allow them to get access to your records and for your premises to do that investigation. That's part of the clauses they include in most commercial solicitations. There's a text messaging ban. I mean, everyone should know this by now. So actually, you see this clause, it's not really listed that much anymore, but when you're on the base and actually anywhere on Guam, you should not be texting them while driving. So they just want to make sure you have some kind of company policy that states that, and that you're also including that in your subcontracts. Here's the Buy American clause. So basically, they want to make sure that the things you're selling are domestic end products. And that, like I said, there's a whole workshop we do on Buy American. And that could lead to all kinds of exceptions. But, in general, they want to use domestic end products. The contracting officer can use non-domestic products, and they can provide you a list of foreign products that are treated as domestic. And like I said, normally that comes in with trade agreements. But there are many, many, many exceptions, and we do a whole workshop on that, so I don't want to go into the details too much. But when you're selling products to the government, you'll normally see this Buy American clause listed in the solicitation. Some foreign countries are restricted, and so these are basically the bad countries. So don't sell anything made in these countries: Burma, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Sudan. And I'm sure there's going to be more added to the list probably in the next few months or so. And then there's actually also vendors and companies that you're not allowed to purchase from and then resell those products to the government. They're basically the blacklisted companies. Foreign Office of Foreign Assets controls a list, and they call these the specially designated nationals and block persons list. And so I have a list, I can send it to you. It's amazing how this list is over, I believe, 1,500 pages. So it's quite a long, and the font is small too. So if you want a copy, I'll send it to you. Maybe I'll see if it fits in the email that I send out later today to everyone. All right. FOB Destination, freight on board. If you're familiar with selling products and shipping products, that's what FOB is, freight on board. Shippers know this. But basically, it just means you're responsible for the product until it gets to the government's point of acceptance. So if they want you to deliver this product to Anderson Air Force Base somewhere, it's actually, and something goes wrong, the government's not going to be liable for anything until it gets into their hands. Sometimes, though, the point of acceptance is not Guam. Sometimes they want you to deliver it to a storage depot, like one in Tracy, California, which is a normal place that a lot of things go. that end up on Guam eventually. So if that's the case, you just got to make sure it gets to there and someone signs off it, then it's out of your hands if something happens on its way to Guam from Tracy, California. So just make sure one of the big things with commercial items, selling to the government, where do they want it delivered? That you really want to make sure you know, because obviously that plays a factor in your pricing as well because the freight involved. All right, whistleblower rights. So this is actually a DFARS clause. So you notice it starts with a 252 instead of a 52. And so basically the Department of Defense adding to the FAR, and they're saying that employers must let their employees know of their whistleblower rights and protections. So you should have something in place in your company, and you can go and click on this link, and I think there might even be a template there that you can use to put some kind of plan together. And you should also include this in your subcontracts. Payments. So there's a payments clause. The government has to tell you how you're going to get paid, right? So there's rules for that. And usually after delivery and then after acceptance and submission of your proper invoice, right? So after you deliver the product, you will go use in the Department of Defense case, the WAF system, to submit your invoice. And then someone where you delivered the product will accept it. And then the contracting office will sign off on that. And then it'll go to the payment office known as DFARS, Defense Finance and Accounting Services. And they will review everything and make sure the quantities match, the dollar amounts match, and it matches what was in the contract. And if everything looks good, they'll sign off on it and issue the payment, which will be paid to you direct deposit into your bank account via whatever bank account you listed in the SAM registration. So that's the other reason for the SAM registration to be active. If your SAM registration is inactive, the WAF system will go look for it because it'll say, hey, this guy wants payment and we want to give you the payment, or let's go to make SAM, make sure we know which bank account to stick it in. If you're inactive, it won't see the bank account and no payment will be made. So just make sure your SAM account, another reason to have your SAM account active is you won't get paid if it's inactive. So make sure you keep it active. Payments on partial deliveries are possible. However, payments on up before you deliver, it's very, very rare. You have to be some really extenuating circumstances for that. So normally the government, that's why you can assign your payment to a bank or a credit union and work with them with some kind of line of credit if you need to buy something from your supplier to then resell to the government. There's discounts for prompt payment. So you can tell the government, hey, the price is going to be $10,000, but if you pay us in 7 days, the price will be $9,500, whatever it is. You can do that in your offer. And if the government takes advantage, you'll see, and you'll get your payment faster. The government does not have to take advantage of the discount, but if they want to, and it's beneficial for them, they will, and you'll notice it when you get your payment. All right. So this is also from the DFARS, another 252 clause, contract payments. So just know if you have delinquent federal debt, the IRS is allowed to take up to 100% of your contract payment. That's horrible, huh? So make sure you don't have any delinquent federal debt. So, however, there are some obviously exceptions to this. If the contracting officer basically, notices, hey, you can't perform on your contract anymore because the IRS has taken all of your money, and it affects national security or some other type of situation that's up there with national security, then the contracting officers can actually step in for you and say, hey, IRS, can you please stop the levy, or let's work on some kind of payment plan to make sure that this contract continues because we need the item or the service or the construction, whatever it is. But in general, just, don't have delinquent federal debt. It's not a good thing to have. All right. This is the cybersecurity clause that came into effect a couple years ago, basically, where you as a prime contractor and subcontractors as well need to be protecting certain DoD, Department of Defense information. Remember, this is a DFARS, so this affects the Department of Defense. So basically, you got to have adequate security on your IT systems, and you basically need to attest to that as well. If you're using cloud computing, then whatever system you're using, like Amazon Cloud or whoever, they just got to make sure that the data that they're storing in their servers is in the US unless the contracting officer allows it to be stored elsewhere. Your IT systems got to follow these 14 key protocols. We kind of cover this in our cybersecurity workshop and webinar, so I'm not going to go into all the specifics there. And then, of course, if your system is compromised, you get hacked, you get the ransomware or something like that, you got to review your IT system and you got to report it. And there's an address here where you report it. Some more related to cybersecurity. This is if you have CUI, which is covered information, basically, covered unclassified information. So none of this relates to classified information. That has its own set of standards. This is just unclassified information. And how will you know? The solicitation will tell you if there's CUI in there. You can always do a Control F and just search CUI, and if nothing pops up, then you're probably good. There's probably no controlled unclassified information. But basically, this means you just got to be doing a self-assessment of your implementing those 14 procedures from this NIST, the National Institute of, I forget what it is now, Standards and Technology, I believe. And so you got to make sure you're using that assessment methodology. And like I said, we do a whole workshop on that. And that you're uploading your score to that supplier performance risk system, which is in the same system where the WAF is located. So you shouldn't have any problem getting access to that. But if you can't access it, you can email your assessment to that email address. This also flows down to subcontractors. So basically what the government is saying is, you know, cybersecurity is a big issue. We want to make sure our contractors and subcontractors are complying with making sure their systems are safe. And there's a procedure you need to do to make sure your system is safe. And we discussed that in our cybersecurity webinar. 52.204.25. So again, related kind of to cybersecurity. There's certain telecommunications and video services and equipment that the government does not want you to use. So make sure these are the bad companies here. And this list might be longer. This was from about 6 months or 4 months ago. So it could have gotten longer. There might be more companies added. But you can always click on that link and check that clause, and they'll tell you about the companies. And so not only are you not allowed to sell the things made by these companies, you're also not supposed to be using them in your business as well. And then this also applies to, there's another clause, 52.204.23, which does the same thing for Kaspersky. They were known for their antivirus software years and years ago, probably a decade ago. And then they still make it, but it's just not allowable for federal contracting. Okay, 52.96. So basically, this kind of people were wondering always, you know, there are people who are suspended and are debarred and are not allowed to deal with the federal government. But what if you want to use them as a subcontractor? Is that allowable, right? Well, so as long as the contract's not over 30,000, 35,000, you could use a debarred or suspended subcontractor. The exception, though, is commercial off the shelf, right? Unless there's a compelling reason. So if you want to go over 35,000 with a debarred subcontractor, there must be some kind of reason, and you got to notify the contracting officer and let them know what the reason is. Maybe they're the only supplier of the product, which would be interesting to me that the government would keep using that product. But you know, that could be a reason. Who knows? All right. And then we're getting close to the end here. So this is a pretty quick webinar today. But this is one of workers with disabilities. So you see this when you fill out your SAM registration, there's some questions in there about equal employment opportunity and affirmative action. And this is what this clause relates to here. So you see this included in almost every solicitation. You shouldn't be discriminating. You should be making an effort to hire workers with disabilities as well as veterans. It applies to veterans as well. And so there should be any discrimination, and you should have some kind of plan in place, an affirmative action plan. And you need to include this, and this applies to every contract, subcontract that's over $15,000. So if you have some subs and you're going to sub something out, and it's going to be more than $50,000, they need to be doing this as well. All right. I think the next time we do this, I think this is the last slide. So, yep. So let me stop the share and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, I don't know why this is like this, but questions? There we go. Anybody have any questions? All right, so the next time, I didn't realize how quick this was gonna go. Usually it takes a little longer. So next time I think we'll add some more clauses related to services and construction so we can cover those areas as well, where most of these related to commercial items. So if there's no questions, join us next Thursday as we discuss, I believe, Government of Guam, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we'll talk about Government of Guam procurement and how their procurement law is set up and what we can do to assist you with Government of Guam contracts. Thanks for joining us, everyone. See you next week.